Right, the UGMA and the UTMA?
Yes, so the UGMA was set up, the Uniform Gift to Minors Act, was set up in the 1950s with the goal that if you were a parent or a family member and you wanted to transfer money to a minor, this is a type of account that would allow you to do that. In the 1980s, they realized they needed a little bit more flexibility, so they changed it to the Uniform Transfer to Minor Act, and that also allows you to transfer both property and other types of assets besides cash to a minor.
Now, do these things have to be used for a college education, or it's just giving your cash to your kid, basically?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of giving your cash to your kid, but in a mitigated fashion. So where a trust has a trustee who administers the trust, here you have a custodian. But a trust is relatively complicated to set up. It requires a lot of legal fees and just a complex structure. UGMA and UTMA accounts are very simple to put together. So for thousands to tens of thousands of dollars being transferred, that's the best route. If you want to go hundreds of thousands of dollars, trust is really the way you want to go.
Now, I know that when you give a lot of money to your child, there are often gift taxes involved. Are there taxes involved with setting up these custodial accounts as well?
Well, because these custodial accounts are typically under $10,000 a year that you're going to be giving, it kind of flies under the radar of the gift tax.
Okay.
One of the things that it does is the person who's the custodian of the account is able to use this money for any expenses that are for the direct benefit of the child. So up until the point that they're going to college, if there are regular elementary, middle, and high school costs, that can be expended from this fund.
Now, can you yourself, the parent, be the custodian, or does a third party have to be the custodian?
Anyone can be named a custodian. It could be yourself, or you can choose a third party if you think that's better. One thing we do recommend is, if you're getting up there in age, you may want to add someone other than yourself as the custodian, because if you do happen to die, the custodian is in control of all the money that's in this account until the minor reaches either 18 or 21. The fact that you are in control and you do have the authorization to spend that money, if you die, it's counted as part of your estate, even though it's not your property. So if you're older, you more likely than not want to make someone else the administrator.
All right, so these are all the reasons that you just mentioned are how a custodial account differs from a trust. And you recommend, if it's a smaller amount of money, looking at a custodial account, a larger amount of money using a trust, correct?
Yes.
But both of these things are good for paying for your child's college education. Now, tell us the advantages of using a custodial account to pay for your child's college.
So there are a couple different advantages. One is, if you put money just into a 529 account, you have no access to that money until your child is physically in college. Here, you and your child both have access to that money, and your child can watch it grow. So it's their money, or property if you choose to put property in there. But they don't have access until they're 14. They don't have access to the specific ways it's being used. From 14 to 18, they can see how all those dollars are being spent, so they can just learn how money's invested, how it grows, how it's properly, just in general, held and spent. They can see how it's being directly applied to their college education, and then you can choose whether they get access to the money at 18 or at 21, but at a certain point they get the remainder of those dollars. So if you don't know how expensive your child's college is going to be, this can make sure they only have access at 21 after it's paid for their college education, and then they have the rest of the money that they can use as they'd like.
All right, that sounds great. How does it impact the parents' income taxes?
So a parent's income tax, because this is it's considered to be the child's income and the child's dollars. It's not going to have any effect on the parent's income taxes.
Even
and in
though
some cases,
if you die, it's considered part of your estate.
Yeah, that's a strange loophole. But on a year-to-year basis, it's considered the child's income. So the child is actually going to be taxed on the money that's in one of these accounts, but the money in that account can be used to pay its own taxes. So if a parent is at a particularly high tax bracket, they may choose to set up one of these accounts to take that money and make sure it's taxed at a very different bracket.
All right, makes sense. But like with all things, there's got to be some disadvantages, right? With most things, there are some disadvantages. What are the disadvantages of a custodial account?
So one of them is you can't take the money back. So once you put money or property in a custodial account, it's that child's. You have the ability to use it specifically for their best interest up until the point that they're 18 or 21.
So no threats of, I'm going to disown you if you don't listen to me, because they know the money is already there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have some cases where a parent will put money into a custodial account, later change their mind and try to take it back, and they can't. It's now the child's property. So even though you're the administrator, it's the child's property. And you can't use it for any purpose that's not directly tied to the child's best interest.
And how many purposes are there that could easily fall under that category other than education?
I mean, there's assorted expenses around education, computers and notebooks. A car could be considered in the child's best interest. They need it to get to and from work. So it's a little bit more flexible than say a 529, which is very targeted about paying for college.
Does it matter if you set one up for multiple children?
That's the thing here too. It's for the specific child that the account was created for. It can't roll over. And you have some instances where a parent will set up a custodial account for one child, assume that they'll have enough money to set up an equal-sized account for another child, but for whatever reason doesn't have as many finances for that second child. You're stuck. You can't take money out of one into the other to even those two up. Once money's put in, it's for that one child, and you have very little flexibility.
Now, what if the child does get a good financial aid package and it turns out a lot of that money isn't directly needed for the education? What happens to it?
I mean, that's another issue here. Colleges are going to look at this as the child's own income. So it's going to be factored in. What you have to look at is a lot of money in financial aid is actually loans. So if you're lucky enough to have a fair amount of money to put in a custodial account, what's really going to be deducted are loans they have to pay down the line, but it will factor in.
So unless you're assuming your child is going to get a complete free ride at college, which is a very difficult thing to get, this will probably help them either way.
Yeah, this is a reasonable way, if you do have assets that you want to transfer to a child, to give it to them and to have it factor into their college expenses.
All right. In this segment, Jordan joins us to answer some viewer questions. Jordan, thanks so much for sticking around.